Welcome back to the 2 Minute Drill. I'm Michael Rochman, that's Bailey Kumar, and we are talking about the NFC North draft recaps today. We have some AFC ones that we've done in the past, and now we're finishing out the week strong with some NFC. And today we're talking about the NFC North, the Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers, and Minnesota Vikings. And we're going to start out with the team that picked at number one. Bailey, we called it. We were right on the money. It just shows our ball knowledge, really. Caleb Williams went with the first pick, but this team also got Rome Odunze with the ninth pick. It was a great first round for them. Two top 10 picks. It was really hard to go wrong. But what did you make of these selections? Could they have gone better? Could they have gone worse? What did you think?
I mean, I guess they could have gone better. They could have gone Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of Rome Odunze, but I think this is the realistic best case scenario for the Bears. Kind of when you're looking at the board and what realistically could have fallen to them at 9, Odunze was kind of the top option available. There were some, thoughts is like, okay, what if, the Chargers went alt and then the Giants went neighbors, and then it's like, what if the Titans take Odunze? Kind of what do the Bears do at 9? I think their options there might have been a little bit worse, but luckily for them, Titans went Latham, and so they get Odunze, which is, that receiving room is just so ridiculous now. I can't even describe it. What an absolutely stacked room.
Yeah, it seemed like the interest for this team was between Dallas Turner and Rome Odunze. That was kind of the consensus view on the two directions they could go. Both fell to them. They had the option of choosing either one, and they went with Odunze. For me personally, I love the selection. I get that maybe Keenan Allen and DJ Moore are very good receivers to where you didn't need to make the pick, but Odunze is going to be the long-term wide receiver one of this team, in my opinion. It wouldn't shock me if he's the most productive receiver on this team as soon as next year. I think he is that good. He's that complete of a receiver in my mind, and he was my number 2 overall prospect. Kind of 1A, 1B with Harrison, but I gave the bump to Harrison. So number 2 prospect and a complete blue chip type guy that really, if it weren't for the fact that he was surrounded by talented receivers like Harrison and Neighbors, I'd probably be calling him generational. But it's like, can you call 2 guys generational in the same class? I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to the word, but outstanding receiver, dominant wideout. And, again, like we talked about with Polk in our AFC East review, I think this was a guy that got used as a vertical threat a lot, but there's a lot more to be unlocked in the underneath game. You saw Michigan where they weren't able to just dominate with the vertical passing game. So they had to use Odunze in multiple ways. And he was still dominant by finding, manufactured touches, short to intermediate passes. He was able to find production. And I think in the NFL, he's going to have more looks like that. He's going to completely elevate his game further than what we already saw at Washington when he was arguably one of the best wideouts in the country. So I'm excited for him, and I think the pairing of Williams and Odunze is going to be scary for the NFL. I really don't think there's any better way this could have gone. Obviously, maybe they could have got Harrison, but that's someone who's off the board. So for players that were on the board, maybe it wasn't the biggest need on this roster, but I think getting Williams, getting Odunze, those are the 2 best players in the class for my grades and evaluation. So I love the pick.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look back to last class, like most people would probably have Caleb Williams ahead of Bryce Young in last year's draft as the QB1, and I'm guessing most people would also have Rome Odunze as a wide receiver 1 in that class. So, I mean, great value here. I mean, he kind of like, oh, Odunze's a wide receiver 3 in here. How good is he? But this guy's legitimately talented. Would have been wide receiver 1 for me personally in a lot of drafts. So yeah, absolutely slam dunk. Top first 2 picks.
Yeah, and they move on to the rest of their draft. They only had 3 more picks following this first round, so maybe not the most depth of a draft class, but still very nice picks. With the 3rd round, they went Kieran Amagachi, the offensive tackle out of Yale. And, this is someone that on my profile form, I compared him to Braxton Jones. I think this is someone that, missed that last season of play, which could have potentially bumped him up even further on draft boards. But getting to see what he did in those three games that he did play, he looked the part. He has a lot of potential. He has a great frame. What I think is interesting about this guy is a lot of these athletic, traitsy kind of tackles, they are usually lacking in size and strength, but he's 326 pounds. So the power is going to be there. And I think once an NFL coach kind of unlocks that aspect of him and kind of further develops his game, I think he's going to be a very good tackle. Now, Braxton Jones is someone that I think a little higher of than a lot of people. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jones is able to hold down that left tackle spot. And I think Wright holds down right tackle. So there's a question of when does Amagachi find himself on the field for this pick. But I still think, with the talent and upside that was there and just the overall investment that you're going to have in the offensive line, it's okay to kind of take that pick and just say, look, worst case, he's just not good enough to out snap Braxton Jones, who's also developed and we're fine with that. But, I wouldn't be shocked if Amagaji ends up being the left tackle of this team in the long term. It's just, I understand that Braxton Jones still has a lot of growth on his plate as well. And with their additional day 3 picks, they went and got Torrey Taylor, the punter out of Iowa. And, I know a lot of people are going to kind of raise their eyebrow at a punter going in round 4, but having someone that can kind of flip the field like this is definitely an advantage to have, especially with such a young team. If you're able to give your defense that much of a field advantage whenever it comes to positioning and where the opposing offense is starting drives, I think you're going to give yourself a little bit of a leg up that a lot of people don't really kind of give a proper credit to when it comes to the punter position. And then with their last pick, Austin Booker, edge rusher out of Kansas. This is a guy that maybe didn't test as well as hoped for sort of the nimble, kind of lightweight edge rusher, but he still is someone that came in and started for Kansas this year, first year starting, and put together some great numbers. There's some question about the overall career production, but in his 1 year as a starter, he was able to put up some very nice, promising production to where I think as a rotational edge rusher, he can really be something for this team, and that's nice depth.
Yeah, this might be our shortest recap ever because the Bears only have 5 picks. But yeah, I think they did a great job with the rest of their picks. And, if Kieran doesn't develop into a starting left tackle, I think that's fine. I think we've seen how important it is to kind of have 3 good offensive tackles because injuries happen, things happen. You always want a solid, reliable backup guy, especially with a young QB that you can kind of trust to hold down either side of the line in case something does happen. So yeah, picks like this, I think are kind of important, even if they're not like necessarily going to pay off in the long run, per se, because, probably in the Bears' eyes, it's ideal if Kieran never takes snap for them, right? And Jones and Darnold Wright kind of just develop to the point where they're just both, solid tackles and you don't even need anybody else besides them and they stay healthy their entire career. So yeah, I don't mind that pick. Torrey Taylor, punter. Yeah, I mean, punters do have a lot more value, I think, than people get credit for, as you said. So don't hate this pick at all. And then they trade a future pick, I believe a future 4th, to take Austin Booker. I mean, look, they needed an edge rusher after what happened last year, kind of. We saw how bad their edge rooms was the past couple of years. They took Montez Sweat. They kind of get this guy. And Jeremiah made an interesting point during the draft show where he said that Austin Booker, if he returned, would have been like a 1st or 2nd round pick. I'm not sure if I believe that, but, this is kind of a situation where you're okay giving up a future pick to get a guy, get him to start developing in your room, and it could pay off dividends if they could kind of have him reach that full potential.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to draft grade, what are you thinking for the Bears?
This is a tough one. I mean, it's kind of like I'm not saying they took the obvious pick at each pick, but they took the obvious pick at 1. They kind of took the obvious pick at 9. They, took a punter, which is not obvious, but I mean, I would just have to give this an A or an A+. Probably more A+, just because of how kind of well they played it. They hit kind of their, not main needs, but they hit like a QB. They needed QB. They needed maybe they didn't need another wide receiver, maybe a bit of a luxury pick, but they took the wide receiver and they still got that edge later by trading back in. I think they've been having some punting problems, so getting a punter is good. Getting a reliable backup OT is good. So I don't know. It's all good picks, and they're all good players too that they took at those positions. So hard to give it anything other than an A or A+.
Yeah, I'd say I'd have to give it like an A as well. I think obviously they were going to go Caleb. That became extremely clear once they traded Justin Fields away. Adding Odunze, who I viewed as the 2nd best prospect in this class, that's an excellent pick in my book. I don't care about as big a need maybe, but I like Amagaji. I like Austin Booker, and I feel like Torrey Taylor is going to be a very good punter for them. So while maybe they aren't going to see like this huge impact from their day 3 haul or whatever, it's still a very good draft. And I think this is going to be a draft that kind of turns them into that next tier of team, help them get competitive, maybe turn a new leaf in Chicago overall to where this is a team that can contend for the NFC North and maybe even contend in the NFC, in the NFL. Who knows? It all kind of rests on Caleb's shoulders and how good he can be. But this is a very good situation for him to land in now. They've surrounded him with talent. I'm excited to see what happens with Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. I know there's some Seattle fans that maybe aren't the biggest fan of him, but I still have a lot of high hopes for him. So I'm excited for this team. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential right away. So I'm giving it an A, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do in 2024. For the next team, another team that got a quarterback, Minnesota Vikings. They traded up from 11 to 10 to get J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. Then they traded up from 23 to 17 in order to acquire Dallas Turner, edge rusher out of Alabama. day one was interesting for Minnesota, and it was a team that everyone had their eye on. Maybe didn't make the trades that people were expecting, but they did wheel and deal a little bit. What were your thoughts on day one for Minnesota?
We gotta unplug Quessy's phone line at this point. Too many trades, man. I don't understand this. I still don't understand the reasoning for having to trade for that Houston first so early in the process, unless it's just like a major kind of like board or kind of like team mystery that they had where they kind of trade for that versus like, oh man, we have to trade up for J.J. McCarthy. And they get to draft day and they're like, actually we don't. And we have this extra first. But then they trade up again with both of their first round picks, by a little bit. But all these picks, add up. I think they traded a future second, a future third, and a future fourth just to get these guys. And, look, I'm a J.J. McCarthy fan. I think he's a great fit in that offense, kind of under Kevin O'Connell, can run what they need to run. Maybe not as good as Kirk Cousins will be executing the offense, but he's not going to be as big of as a drop off as something like Sam Darnold would be. So, I really like JJ McCarthy's fit on the team, and Dallas Turner is a phenomenal prospect. He's so athletic. The need of edge is kind of questionable. I mean, they just signed Jonathan Grenard and they have Andrew Van Ginkel, but maybe they want to see all three on the field at the same time. But Dallas Turner is a fantastic player, long-term answer at that edge position. But I'm just not sure about the capital they gave up to get these guys, and I'm not sure about the trade-ups to get these guys.
Yeah, for their first-round picks, it's kind of just going to boil down to two things for me. It's, do I trust Kevin O'Connell when it comes to him selecting what quarterback is going to be running his offense? And the answer is yes. And then, do I trust Brian Flores to pick out an edge rusher that he is confident is going to produce in his defense? And the answer is yes. So while I personally wasn't as high as consensus opinion on McCarthy, on Dallas Turner, I do think that they're landing in such great spots that I think they're both going to pan out well, and it's going to be a good day one pick for Minnesota for both options. And I think the interesting thing with Dallas Turner is you're going to have that rotation. I think Van Ginkel is a perfect third option that kind of gets in a lot for either guy to keep everyone fresh, but Dallas Turner has the speed and length to be really deadly on the outside. There's still a lot of work, though, when it comes to disengagement and just overall polish as an edge rusher that will need to be worked on. But, if you're working with a guy like Flores every day, I trust that will come along. J.J. McCarthy is landing in an offense where he is handing the ball off to Aaron Jones, throwing the ball to Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, T.J. Hawkinson. What more can you ask for as a rookie quarterback? I understand that there's questions about how much of this offense can he kind of shoulder, how much can he handle the downfield passing on a consistent basis in the NFL. But, you're going to be in probably the best chance to succeed as possible as of any of these rookie quarterbacks because of what Kevin O'Connell brings to the table. So, I think McCarthy's going to work out, and I think he's going to be fine. I just question the overall upside, and I guess just because of my own personal evaluation. But in terms of addressing needs and addressing just finding guys that fit what they're looking for, it makes total sense. With the day 3 selections, they had a decent batch of them. They had 5. With the 4th round pick, they went Kyrie Jackson. Then in the 6th round, they got Will Reichard and Walter Rouse, I think is the proper pronunciation, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Then in the 7th round, they got Michael Juergens, the center out of Wake Forest, and they selected Levi Drake Rodriguez, the defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. What is it? It's something Commerce.
Yeah, Texas A&M and Commerce.
Texas A&M and Commerce. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Interesting selection. I didn't watch any Levi Drake Rodriguez, so I apologize.
Don't blame me for that.
Say there. But I saw some photos. He's a handsome guy, so
yeah.
A lot of respect there. But when I'm looking at the other picks of guys that I've actually had a little bit of familiarity with watching, Kyrie Jackson is an interesting one because this Flores defense, I think, is one where he would love to be running man a lot, but the cornerback system kind of resulted in him having to run a little bit more zone than I think he wanted to. I'm not sure I trust Kyrie Jackson in necessarily running a lot of man looks, but if he's kind of running a press man bail type thing where you're kind of taking that quarter of the field, then I trust Kyrie Jackson because of the size and the playmaking ability that he offers. I like Rouse. I think he is a very nice athletic tackle. I kind of liked him, similar to Justin Herron of the Patriots. That whenever I was watching, it was just there's nice athleticism, nice technique, kind of comfortable play. Probably never going to be a answer as your starting tackle, but I think he's a really nice swing guy And as long as he's brought up properly, I think there's value there. With Will Reichard, he's been a clutch kicker at Alabama for a while, made a lot of solid kicks, and I think Minnesota's just kind of looking for stability at the position. And then with Michael Juergens, brother of Cam Juergens, center for the Eagles now. And I think this is someone that, he's been talked about all over the draft board as an interior offensive lineman. And getting him in the 7th round as solid depth, I think it's going to work out. Maybe he's battling for just being that center too, but I think there is value, and I think he has a chance to earn the job.
Yeah. Was there confirmation that Michael Juergens is Cam Juergens' brother? Did they say that?
Maybe I just assumed that. I thought
two centers with the same last name would be an interesting coincidence. But I try to look that up too, because I'm like, another Juergens center. But yeah, I mean, the Bengals, I think, kind of suffered without their day 2 picks here a little bit. I think Eddie Ingram will be their last day 2 pick until 2026, pending more trades. So yeah, I think they kind of suffered in the second round here. I mean, this day 3 a little bit without those day 2 picks. I found the Kyrie Jack pick kind of interesting because the Vikings were in the position to take the first cornerback off the board at pick 17 when they traded up, and they chose not to. They opted for an edge rusher, which I found was pretty interesting. So I don't know if that speaks to Flores' confidence in their current unit or how highly they have Dallas Turner as a prospect. But yeah, that was pretty interesting to me. Yeah, Will Reichard, kicker. Always need kickers. Not as important as punters, but still important. And then Levi Drake Rodriguez, Prospect X, as the Athletic likes to do. Just, a great story. Always love to see those guys picked. But, man, it's getting tough for these lower-level guys to get selected, as we kind of see in this draft. So, nice to see one picked.
Yeah, so as you're talking, I was Googling. They're not related. I don't know where I got that from. I swear it was like something that I had confirmed to myself, like, oh, yeah, they're related, and now we'll see how his brother does. But
it was a fair
no
assumption.
relation.
It was a fair assumption.
Misinformation being spread here on 2-minute drill, so we apologize for that. But Michael Juergens was a center that had a lot of attention over the past 2 years of being talked about as a potential mid-round center. So going to be interesting to see if he can kind of prove the hype right while still going in the 7th round and potentially earn some backup center spot on the roster. So overall, this is an interesting Vikings draft. What would you grade it?
B minus, D plus. I mean, I don't mind the players. I like the players. The capital they give up for these guys is just brutal, I think. And it's just their first 2 picks. I like J.J. McCarthy. I like Dallas Turner. Maybe they get their franchise QB out of this draft, but oh my goodness. I feel like the Vikings here are kind of not in a rebuild, but you really need to nail these picks. I don't know. I don't know if they did it. I mean, you have McCarthy on the rookie contract, so you do have a little bit more wiggle room for if you, don't need to build to their draft necessarily. You kind of go through free agency while McCarthy's so cheap. But, I mean, you're going to pay Justin Jefferson soon. You're going to pay Christian Darrisaw soon, so I don't know how much wiggle room you actually have there. It's important to hit these picks, and I'm not sure how many long-term starters I see out of their top 2 picks here. So, yeah, D plus. C minus, and they trade away their future capital. So in future drafts, it's gonna be harder for them to get more starters in that way. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm not very high on this draft though, as it stands.
Yeah, I think I'd have to give it a C. I think the addressing of picks is fine, but you're kind of strapping yourself to only hitting on these draft picks. And I know that there's a certain mindset where it's like, oh, if JJ McCarthy doesn't work out, then this is all for nothing anyway. But at the same time, you have to give yourself the most amount of picks as you can in order to kind of set yourself up for success in later years where you're trying to retain some of your young talent, but some of it is inevitably going to hit the market. So, when you're consistently dealing away your 2nd and 3rd round pick, you're strapping yourself and you're limiting what you can ultimately do in the future. So I like Turner. I like McCarthy, but personally, I didn't value them as highly as some of the other quarterbacks and edge rushers on the board. I didn't love the day 3 selections overall. I felt there was some talent that could have maybe provided more stability and depth to this roster, and I didn't love the trades either. So I'll give them a C plus. It's not necessarily the picks; it's more just like the team building. I don't super support it in that regard. Moving on to the next team that was on the board, though, Green Bay Packers, and they made some waves because this was a team that really had a lot of flexibility when it came to what position they were going to address. They had a few needs, but overall a very young, sustainable roster that you could really kind of carry over into the next season and feel confident on. They decided to spend their 1st round pick on Jordan Morgan, the offensive tackle or guard from Arizona. What'd you make of the pick?
Yeah, this is an interesting pick because I kind of like the Green Bay tackles. I thought they had two pretty good guys in there with Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, who are kind of you can count these guys to be your starter long term, and it's like the Packers did it again with their late round OT, so they turned into starters, but clearly they're a little bit less confident in them maybe than I was. So yeah, they draft Jordan Morgan, who I assume will be playing left tackle for them. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying this is a wasted pick, but the Packers just have so many picks, and they don't really have that many holes on their roster. They can kind of do whatever they want. So they looked at their depth chart and they said, "This is the biggest upgrade from starter to draft pick that we can find." I'm okay with this pick, but I'm thinking if there was a better way to use this pick, and you have to trust the Packers front office when it comes to O-line at this point, but I'm not sure. This is going to be a very interesting pick to see how it kind of develops.
Yeah, personally, I was very low on Jordan Morgan, so I don't love this pick. I think they just should have went with Graham Barton and went one pick later. I feel like he would have provided more value, whether that was at center or guard. I do expect Jordan Morgan to kick in rather than them having Rasheed Walker or Zach Tom serve at guard, but I know there was talk about Tom potentially being more of an all-pro guard than he is a very valuable starter at right tackle. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I trust the Packers' development and just overall evaluation of offensive line talent to where I can't really be too critical to where I'm like, oh, they don't know what they're doing, but listen to me. But I don't know. I feel like Graham Barton was far and away the better player, especially on the interior. And I think that's where both these guys are going to end up playing. I think he is phenomenal, has a great motor, has just everything you could ask for. Whereas Morgan, I felt like on the outside, he struggled with just the overall ability to contain the edge. I think he has length issues, obviously. That's been talked about up and down. But in terms of just being able to sustain his blocks on the outside, he struggled. And then when it came to the power, where you'd kind of want to see that more if he's going to be kicking inside, I didn't see that either. So he's a great mover. He's got some nice energy, and I think there's some nice traits. But overall, I just didn't think he checked the boxes enough at tackle or at guard for me to feel confident in him moving to the NFL. And so I was very low on him compared to the consensus. And so it's hard for me to just sign off on this pick just because I trust the Packers. But I'm sort of in the middle there where it's like I didn't like them a lot, but I know the Packers are really good with these types of blockers. So I guess it's a we'll see. But the Packers continued on with their draft. And I think their day two was probably one of the more impressive of any organization. Getting Edgerrin Cooper, getting Javon Bullard, I think was home run picks. And then they continue that up with 2 third-round picks in Marshawn Lloyd and Tyron Hopper. Bailey, I'll let you take this thing first. What do you think of their day 2 selections?
I mean, Edgerrin Cooper to the Packers, such a predictable pick. This is exactly what they look for their linebackers. It's just such a good connection. He's going to be a great starter for them. My personal linebacker one in the class, going to be a great fit, great pick there. I found the Marshawn Lloyd pick a bit interesting because they kind of just paid Josh Jacobs all that money, and then they did bring back A.J. Dillon. I'm not sure on the contract length of Dillon, but I did think it was interesting. But, I mean, this was their 5th or 4th pick of the night, and you kind of just start taking your favorite players at that point when you kind of fill all your holes like they had a linebacker and, Javon Bullard. The one hole I would say the Packers did have coming into this draft was safety. They took a good amount of DVs in this class, so I think they definitely hit their mark. Bullard is a great player, and I don't know. Tyron Hopper is not somebody that I've seen or known a lot about personally, but I assume he'll just help out in that linebacker room.
Yeah, so linebacker was probably, without a doubt, their biggest need because Isaiah McGuire was the projected starter at the time. And no offense, that would have been not great to have as your starting linebacker. So to get Edgerrin Cooper with their first pick on day 2 and then to get Tyron Hopper later, who I think has really nice range and really nice pursuit speed, especially when going downhill. I think both those guys added into that linebacker room just kind of rejuvenates the unit and brings a lot of talent to the defense. Javon Bullard was a guy that I comped to Budda Baker. I thought he was safety 1 in this class. I thought that he was a perfect fit for the Packers. He can kind of rotate with McKinney so that both can play free safety and strong safety and kind of rotate around. And, I like Marshawn Lloyd. I think I do have questions about Josh Jacobs long term because there were some issues this past season with the Raiders, whether that's O-line or him, not really sure yet. And I don't think A.J. Dillon's like a long-term answer despite being brought back. So I like Marshawn Lloyd as a potential sleeper in this draft class to be like that mid-round later running back that kind of contributes more than people expect. And then eventually, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the guy that kind of takes over this backfield. It was a really nice day. And I think what we saw most out of this draft for the Packers is that their roster is very much like filled out. So when they were taking guys on day 3, they were kind of just having the luxury of saying, okay, we already have 2 strong safeties, but we like Evan Williams. So we're going to take him and just see if one of these guys is going to kind of beat out the other. If not, that's fine. We can just put him on the practice squad. They did the same with Oladipo. They got Jacob Monk in the 5th round. They got Travis Glover, an offensive tackle that didn't get the combine invite, but met with like 30 teams because of all the athletic upside and stuff that he had to offer. Michael Pratt, who we thought was maybe like a day 2 potential pick and maybe early day 3, but we didn't think he'd get to the 7th round, and now he's there. And I mean, right now, who do they have? They have Sean Clifford as like their backup quarterback, so there's definitely an opportunity for him to earn that backup job. And then with their last 7th round pick, they went with Kalen King, a guy that maybe could play safety, maybe plays at corner, but there's some upside there. I think that's the only position I would have liked to see more addressing, was just trying to get another corner in there because of Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes battling injuries all year. They kind of saw some issues with their cornerback unit. So adding a little bit more talent at that position would have been nice. But overall, I mean, this was kind of the benefit of having a lot of draft picks, having a lot of young talent already on roster for the Packers. And I think they capitalized on it. So what do you think of their day 3 haul for your personal view?
Yeah, I think if I were to go over it, I'd repeat a lot of stuff you said. I love the Michael Pratt pick. I think he's maybe a better QB2 than Sean Clifford is on the roster. Get him in the 7th is just what a great pick by them. Kalen King, a guy who had a lot of preseason hype, didn't play particularly well this season, bombed the combine. So maybe there's something there, like you said, moving the safety, try to still get some value out of him. And yeah, they just kind of filled up on the positions they need. I think they're just taking whoever they had at the top of the board. Didn't really care about what position. They just had so many picks, and yeah, very, very just kind of do whatever draft I feel from them. But yeah, I agree. I would have liked to see them take a corner. I feel like it's kind of surprising that they didn't, just because of kind of the long-term outlook of the room. But besides that, that's just a small nitpick, and good pick.
Yeah, and I will say I really like the Jacob Monk pick. If he surprises, it wouldn't shock me. I think he's a really good center. Played both at guard and center for the Duke Blue Devils. Was a legitimately like talented road grader type blocker. I think that he has the potential to be kind of the sneaky offensive line guy that kind of proves that the Packers know what they're doing with this stuff. And if he takes Josh Myers' gig eventually, wouldn't shock me. I think he could be a long-term center for this team.
Yeah, so looking at their entire class, personally, in my opinion, I would probably give them about maybe a B plus B. I do think they took a lot of interesting players, but I feel like that's more of a product with the number of picks they had rather than the value they got at those picks. I do think there's some better selections that they could have made, especially in the 1st round, Jordan Morgan. Maybe they didn't need Tyron Hopper there in the 3rd. They could have taken like a corner there. I would have liked to see. But yeah, I think overall they should be pretty happy with this class and what they got away from it.
Yeah, I think I have questions about the 1st round pick, but everything they did from day 2 on, I absolutely loved. So it's hard for me to just be like, oh, I didn't have the same evaluation on that guy, so now I'm just going to tank their class. Like, this was still a very good haul, and I think this is going to be an impactful draft class. So, I mean, I'm going to give it a B as well. Again, if they would have hit better and gotten like Graham Barton in that 1st round, we may be talking about A plus even. But the Jordan Morgan thing holds it back a little bit for me. But overall, very good draft for them. And if they hit on Morgan, then I'm just a fool, and they should have a very great draft class. And for the last team that we are going to be talking about in the division, the Detroit Lions, who usually would be at the earlier part of it with how bad they usually are, but now they've turned the leaf. They are officially a good franchise under Dan Campbell. And they had a pretty interesting draft. On day 1, they made one of the more notable selections with Terrion Arnold, cornerback out of Alabama, one guy that many people expected to be earlier taken in this draft, a guy that some people viewed as the top cornerback in this class. It's an interesting pick. I want to know your thoughts on it.
Yeah, this is kind of best case scenario for the Lions. We talked about best case scenario with the Bears, Rome Odunze. I think this is best case scenario with the Lions. I know when me and you did our mock, we also had the CBs falling a little bit, and it's a bit interesting to see them also fall come the actual draft day. And the Lions take who I assume is their CB1 just based on kind of scheme fit and what they look for out of corners. And after the Cam Sutton release, and even kind of before the Cam Sutton release, they did have a bit of a cornerback problem. But now last year was kind of looking like a weakness. Is looking like a major strength just looking at their depth chart.
Yeah, they gave up a future third, so there is or not future third this year. So there's a little bit of question of, just the capital they gave up. But I do like Arnold. I think he's a very talented cornerback. Personally, for me, he wasn't my cornerback one, but I think I had him at cornerback 3 behind Kool-Aid McKinstry, Quinyon Mitchell, and it was either him or Wiggins in that next spot. But they're definitely 3 and 4. And that's where I think proper range was like kind of as a late first round guy. So I don't hate the value here with the 24th pick. They traded up a little bit because this was their top guy. So I 100% understand that. I think this is someone that I think has, real upside to be a star cornerback in the league. And, for the Lions, they desperately need cornerback help. They traded for Carlton Davis. There was still some secondary need, and they were able to address that. They continued to address that on day 2 as they went and got Ennis Rakestraw, another guy that maybe should have been off the board a little bit earlier based on the consensus opinion, but fell to 61, and this team took advantage. 2 cornerbacks in back-to-back rounds. Maybe wasn't necessarily the biggest need on the roster. They had guys like Brian Branch that had been playing a lot of slot cornerback snaps, so a little bit interesting to see what happens there in that position. But what do you make of Rakestraw here on day 2?
Yeah, that was an interesting pick because after you kind of go up your third, your second round pick becomes a bit more valuable in terms of, okay, who realistically are we going to get on our 4th round pick? So with our second, we either need to trade back, we need to get a guy that fills our last need. And they double dipped on corner, which I think kind of tips off how kind of poorly they saw their CB room. I think Carlton Davis only has 1 year left on his contract, so definitely some a future with Rakestraw in that defense. But all in all, I don't mind the pick. I do think that maybe they could have addressed some other positions. The roster isn't as kind of deep as one may think after that kind of big playoff run. They do have some positions that I would like to see if upgraded, like linebacker. But yeah, you can't hate on the pick and the value here.
Yeah, I like Rakestraw. I think he's someone that is very good in press man coverage. I think he's aggressive, physical for the ball. He doesn't have a lot of ball production, but he's someone that showed that he had it in the 2022 season. So I trust that it will happen again in the NFL for him. I think he can play in the slot, play outside. He's versatile, and he's very aware on the field. His play IQ is impressive. Day 3 was also impressive for this Lions team. They swung a little bit early in the 4th round with Giovanni Manu, a guy who's 6'8", 350 pounds, played over in British Columbia. So there's a little bit of question of, his overall readiness to the NFL. But I think this is the type of swing for the fences type pick that the Lions could absolutely afford. They took Sion Vaki, the 2-way player out of Utah who had some time at safety and at running back for the Utes. And then on day 3, later on, they got Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany, guys that really easily could have been 4th round picks where they originally selected some of these maybe riskier, more gamble type selections. They got some very promising pieces in Wingo and Mahogany who I really like their upside. And I think if you told me one or both of these guys are sneaky candidates to start in a year or two's time, then I wouldn't be completely shocked. And, I think this is the exact way that you wanted this day 3 to kind of go for the Lions. Maybe not these specific players are who I had in mind for them, but I think in terms of just overall use of their selections, they did a great job with them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think if you told me they took their players in reverse order, so like their 4th was Mahogany, their 5th, and then their next 4th was Wingo, and then they took Vaki and then Manu with their 6th, I would believe you. But to see in this order is a bit interesting. Manu I think, is a real interesting fit here in terms of his kind of long-term fit with the Lions. You have to assume that's the Taylor Decker replacement, but also do you kind of want to move Penny Sewell to eventually left tackle? So maybe you'll have him take over at right tackle. So it can be very interesting, especially in the 4th round where you can't really stash him on the practice squad. You are probably going to have to keep him on the 53-man roster. It's unclear how much value he'll be able to provide there if an injury does happen, if something does happen. So this is why I'm kind of talking about with the Rakestraw, with the 2nd round pick, how valuable that pick does become when you trade your other day 2 pick. And to take a development guy like Manu is kind of just like, we're good with the depth of our roster. Whoever we get, but we're confident in our 53-man right now. And then they took Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany. Like you said, Could have gone a lot earlier. These were definitely higher on kind of the consensus boards. Two guys who I do think will be able to back up and potentially start if it does come to that. I assume both of them will be making the 53-man roster. And yeah, Sion Vaki, who was interestingly announced as a running back during the draft. I did take note of that. So maybe we'll see him play both sides. Maybe we'll see him play running back for now. But yeah, definitely a group of fun players that they took on day 3.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing that I kind of question when it comes to the Lions, just overall draft, was giving up a third round pick of the future in order to get up and get Vaki. I don't know if I view the impact of a guy like Vaki as that important. So giving up a 2025 third round pick where you're already guaranteeing that the pick is going to be earlier than this one does bring a little bit of question into it. And then to then once again trade, I think for 132, they gave up a 25 fourth rounder. So I don't love just like dismissing all these future assets. I think as a Lions team that, this is your first year good. So you don't know how much of it is going to stick around, and you don't know how much of the talent on your roster is going to be able to like return under cheap contracts. So I don't love giving up these mid round picks of the future and potentially burning your assets. But if you viewed Manu and Vaki high enough, then I get it. I just personally didn't view them high enough to be like, okay, now I'm good getting rid of a future third round pick for Manu and getting rid of a future fourth in order to make sure we get Vaki. So in that regard, I'm a little bit questionable, but still overall, I like the selections that they made in this draft haul alone.
Yeah, they're the host team. They gotta make it more exciting. Gotta pick more.
Yeah, exactly. And for a guy like Manu, obviously there's not much of a analysis that we can offer just because we weren't watching a ton of British Columbia games. But this is interesting. I mean, he has all the traits. We've seen some guys like Jordan Mailata who came over to the league and really kind of made those strides. If they're confident that they saw enough of the traits, the athleticism, the tools to make it happen, then he's a very exciting tackle prospect that is the type of guy that you wait on, and eventually you're saying, man, we got this star in the class, and he's someone that really just checks every box. And I think I do agree that Sewell will probably move over to left tackle by the time Decker's gone, and then Manu would hopefully slot in at right. But either way it works out, if this is a starting tackle for them, then it was a huge steal. And giving up a future third isn't too big of a knock on them.
Yeah, I just thought they had some bigger holes on the roster. Like I said, I would like to see another linebacker, maybe another edge player. But I mean, they picked who they picked. There's definitely like I said, there's actually I think some sneaky holes on this roster that not many people would have thought of when you kind of look at their depth chart and who's kind of the next man up. I would have liked to see some higher floor players there, maybe not high ceiling players, but more guys that you're kind of confident can contribute in year one, and you don't really have to develop them like you kind of have to do with Manu and Vaki, who kind of don't really have clear roles right now. So we would like to see some maybe some safer picks there, especially just to kind of build off that great playoff run they had.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting in this class that a lot of the edge rushers that came off the board came off in the first 3 rounds. I believe there was only 3 edge rushers that got taken after that Adisa Isaac pick in the 3rd round, where it was Xavier Thomas round 5, Cedric Johnson round 6, and then Jonah Lalu, who's kind of more of a hybrid type defensive lineman, more so than edge, that got taken in round 7. So it was a very interesting class. I'm trying to look around, see if there's anyone else that we're
Yeah,
missing
Booker
in
got
this,
taken in the
but
5th.
oh, Booker. I'm looking at CBS right now to try to pull
Yeah,
it up, and they have him listed as a linebacker. But yeah,
yeah.
so there were some edge rushers that were available, but I do think it was an interesting kind of lack of depth in this class for the position. So I would get it if they maybe just felt to themselves, okay, there are some intriguing prospects, but maybe not guys that we feel are fit for that 4-3 defense. Guys like Brennan Jackson, I think, could have been interesting fits, but overall, maybe no one that 100% kind of fits what they're looking for. I would like to see like Jalen Harrell probably in the 7th round be a guy that they looked at with those 6th round picks. But again, when Wingo and Mahogany were on the board, I understand those guys being valued higher in the Lions front office. So overall, for a grade, what are you thinking for Detroit?
This is actually a tough one because the trade ups, like you said, were a bit suspect. I do like the players they took. I thought they did have bigger needs though that they did not address, namely I kind of like edge. But I'd like to see some more talent in there. I love the developmental guys, but I'm not sure those are the picks that a team like the Lions make at this stage in the roster construction. We did mention how important it was they kind of build and continually to inject talent into your team just so you can afford to let guys walk. It's okay if Decker leaves. You have a good replacement for him, but I'm not sure if they're really at that point where they're making decisions like that. The roster's still kind of cheap. Might be a bit too looking to the future a bit. I think they should have had a bit of more safer draft, taking some more higher floor guys. So I'll probably give this draft a B minus C plus.
I'm a little bit higher on it just because I do think that they had some really nice picks, and I like their day three value as well. So I'm going to give it a B plus. I think they knocked it out of the park by getting two starting cornerbacks in the secondary that was devoid of really consistent play last year with the injuries that happened. So getting guys like Arnold and Rakestraw plugged in, I think, is huge for pinpointing exactly what went wrong last season. Obviously, I would like to see them address edge, and that's kind of what holds them back from getting an A. But in that B plus range for me, because I think there's a lot of value both with their early picks and with some of their day three selections as well, especially with the upside of a guy like Manu and Mahogany that I think could potentially be starters on this offensive line.
Yeah, and I mean they still have a free agent. I assume they'll maybe add a edge and free agent. I also just looking at their kind of depth chart and their draft, they didn't take a wide receiver, which I thought was pretty surprising. They could have used like a fifth or fourth guy, maybe a little bit of a bigger wide receiver there. So that's a little bit surprising that they didn't address that. Maybe they will in the UDFA section, maybe bring another vet there. So yeah, they're definitely some. I don't think the Lions are done yet, and if they do kind of add a wide receiver and edge, maybe retrospectively this draft will see more of a B plus range because I do like the players they took. They took a lot of good players.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a nice haul, but there are some needs that are still left to be answered. Maybe, in time we'll see guys start to fill that in, whether it's UDFAs or free agents, or maybe just guys that are on roster that are taking those next steps. But we'll see. And, all we can do right now is analyze. And that's what we're doing here on 2 Minute Drill. This is the NFC North recap. Stick with us as we're going to finish out the rest of the NFC divisions throughout the rest of the week. For now, though, I'm Michael Rochman. That's Bailey Kumar, and that's 2 Minute Drill.